Ever notice that one individual who steps into a chaotic scenario, a flooded basement, a crashed hard drive, a complete logistical meltdown, and just goes completely still? No panic attacks, no frantic internet searches with trembling fingers. They just observe, process, and then get to work. Meanwhile, you're hovering in the background, questioning why your immediate reflex was to curl into a ball. So, what exactly divides these problem solvers from the rest of the population? It isn't merely a matter of practice. Once you grasp the underlying psychology, you'll spot it everywhere. Let's rewind to a framework proposed by psychologist Albert Bandura back in the 1970s. He coined the term self-efficacy, stripping away the clinical jargon. This is simply your ingrained conviction that you possess the capacity to manage whatever obstacle is directly in your path. It isn't toxic positivity or blind optimism. It's highly targeted. The innate sense of, I have navigated chaos in the past, and I can navigate this current chaos too. Bandura discovered that this specific conviction drastically alters how long an individual wrestles with a complication before throwing in the towel, and the sheer volume of energy they exert when the going gets tough. So, how do these individuals develop this trait to begin with? That's where the backstory matters. Picture a child attempting to repair something for the absolute first time, genuinely trying, and succeeding. It could be microscopic in scale. They jostled a loose battery and the toy lit up. They restarted the router and the Wi-Fi returned. They applied a bandage and the scrape stopped stinging. That exact fraction of a second shifts something deep within their psyche that has absolutely nothing to do with toys or routers. It fundamentally recalibrates their self-image in relation to adversity. Almost instantly, the environment ceases to be a chaotic force that acts upon them. Instead, it becomes a space they can manipulate and influence. From that day forward, when a crisis hits, their fight-or-flight response doesn't trigger a total system crash. Instead, it pivots into a state of engaged curiosity. They think, a riddle. I am someone who solves riddles. Bandura labeled these milestones mastery experiences. Decades of clinical literature consistently identify them as the most potent generator of self-efficacy in human psychology. Not affirmations, not observing a mentor, but the visceral act of executing a task with your own two hands. That is what permanently alters the brain. It is an acquired comfort with the unknown. Another researcher, Julian Rotter, devoted his career to exploring what he termed locus of control, the extent to which an individual trusts that their own behaviors dictate their reality, as opposed to destiny or chance. Individuals who land firmly on the internal spectrum of this metric don't merely excel at repairing physical objects. They exhibit lower rates of despair. They process overwhelming stress without allowing their entire existence to unravel. They endure much longer against friction. This phenomenon has been documented across countless demographics and societies. The core realization that your personal exertion holds weight is, quite frankly, one of the most resilient mental armors a human can possess. Yet, the vast majority of these resilient folks didn't emerge from the womb with this mentality. It was forged in hyper-specific instances, frequently during their youth, when an authority figure either granted them autonomy or forced them to discover it on their own. In some cases, a parent might have said, I won't give you the shortcut, but I will sit here while you untangle it. In other scenarios, there was simply no one around to assist, forcing the child to become their own safety net. Both routes ultimately arrive at the exact same psychological destination. Here is a fascinating nuance. From an external perspective, this trait heavily mimics raw confidence, but it is actually an entirely different mechanism. When a natural problem solver steps into a fractured environment, they aren't harboring absolute certainty that they will succeed. They don't possess a foolproof roadmap. They experience the exact same hesitation and doubt that you do. The critical divergence is that this hesitation doesn't process as a final judgment to them. It processes as square one. Psychologists refer to this as tolerance of ambiguity, the fortitude to exist inside a messy scenario where the solution is entirely obscured, without emotionally disintegrating while you hunt for it. People who lack this tolerance require immediate closure. They desperately need validation that everything will be fine right this second. When that instant comfort is denied, anxiety hijacks their nervous system, causing them to freeze or rapidly outsource the dilemma to the calmest person in the room before retreating. The fixer in your circle, at some point they adapted to survive in that deeply uncomfortable transitional gray area. Let's take a strategic pause. I need to be entirely transparent here, as skipping this caveat would be a massive disservice to the topic. A subset of individuals who possess the ability to mend absolutely everything, logistically, emotionally, financially, for every single person in their orbit, are not doing so from a foundation of mental strength. For some, extreme competence was a survival tactic to secure their standing in a household. Their worthiness was inextricably tied to being useful. Standing idly by while a crisis unfolded was, during their formative years, an actively dangerous position. Consequently, their nervous system drew a hard line. I will never be useless or helpless again. That isn't self-efficacy. That is a coping mechanism wearing a superhero cape. You can spot the difference when you suggest they delegate a task to someone else. They literally cannot decompress. They pace. They micromanage. They offer rapid-fire, unsolicited advice. The situation must be resolved, not necessarily to alleviate your burden, but because a fractured element in their vicinity resonates as a fractured element within their own identity. However, there is the other variant, and this is the archetype worth emulating. This is the individual who tackles malfunctions out of sheer, unadulterated curiosity, because broken systems are inherently mesmerizing to them. The bridge between a non-functional state and a functional one is their favorite playground. These are the tinkerers who will completely dismantle a device they've already repaired, purely to comprehend its anatomy on a deeper level. They will pose hypothetical questions with zero immediate utility. They will break down a mechanical failure with an obsessive level of granularity that absolutely no one requested, beaming as if they've just unearthed a hidden treasure. These individuals didn't fall in love with the applause or the result. They fell in love with the anatomy of competence itself, the meticulous process of unraveling a knot. Simply sharing space with people possessing this mindset is profoundly grounding, because, without even attempting to preach, they demonstrate a vital truth. Ignorance is a temporary status. Broken is not a permanent condition. You are entirely permitted to put your hands on a terrifying obstacle and actually move it. You might be absorbing this and recognizing that you fit the description of the fixer, perhaps without ever analyzing the why behind it. Or, conversely, you might be realizing that you don't fit this mold at all, and the mere concept of acting this way feels alien. If you fall into the latter category, let me be very direct. Your habit of outsourcing your crises is not a character flaw. It is a historical footprint, a collection of past experiences that trained you to view obstacles as immovable objects that strike you, rather than clay you can mold. And that isn't permanent either. The entire architecture of self-efficacy, Bandura's entire argument, is that it is cultivated incrementally. Small wins, miniature instances of I attempted a thing and the thing yielded. We are not talking about cinematic, heroic interventions. We are talking about tightening a loose screw, making an intimidating phone call on your own, refusing to wait for a rescuer. That is exactly where it begins. But recognizing your internal wiring is only half of the equation. The genuinely grueling part is executing behavioral changes based on that data. Because self-awareness devoid of an actionable framework often morphs into just another concept for your brain to endlessly loop over. You identify the pattern, you slap a label on it, you obsess over it, and absolutely nothing moves forward. That chasm between intellectual insight and actual change, that is the exact gap I've been trying to bridge for the people watching this channel. If you comprehend this psychology intellectually but remain paralyzed in the exact same holding patterns, the same hesitation, the same I'll start properly next Monday routine, there is something in the pinned comment that might be worth your time. It is a 7-day reset bundle built specifically around this neurological pattern, bypassing overthinking, clearing emotional hurdles, and building consistent follow-through in a way that doesn't demand you rely on sheer willpower or force. It is structured into digestible daily modules, so it actively avoids becoming yet another self-help project you start and immediately abandon. It is engineered to actually be completed. If that sounds like where you are right now, it is linked in the description and the pinned comment.